The unexpected reunion. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when KeanuReeves pulled into a quiet town just outside of Santa Fe. He had been driving for hours, seeking a moment of peace away from Hollywood, cameras, and the chaos of fame. The windshield wipers moved slowly back and forth, brushing away the soft drizzle that blurred the view of the road ahead. His motorcycle, sleek and dark, rumbled low as he parked it near an old roadside diner with chipped paint and a faded neon sign that read, "Rosie's Place." He stepped inside, the familiar scent of grilled cheese, black coffee, and something sweet, perhaps fresh pie, welcoming him instantly. It wasn't fancy, but it had character. There were only a few patrons scattered in booths, hunched over plates and mugs. A waitress with tired eyes and a warm smile greeted him. "Anywhere you like," she said gently. Keanu nodded, choosing a booth by the window. He shrugged off his damp jacket, placed it beside him, and glanced around. The diner looked frozen, in time. Checkered floors, vintage jukebox, walls lined with black and white photos of strangers who seemed to belong to another world. He ordered a simple meal: black coffee, grilled cheese, and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, just like old times. He had always appreciated the simple things. While waiting, his gaze drifted toward the kitchen window behind the counter. That's when he saw him. The dishwasher, a tall, lean man with broad shoulders. His back was turned as he scrubbed dishes furiously, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, arms soaked. There was something familiar in his movements, the way his head tilted slightly while rinsing plates, the rhythm of someone who had done this for years. Then he turned around for a second, just a second, and Keanu's heart stopped. It couldn't be. No, but it was. The man looked older, face worn by time, eyes dimmer than he remembered. But the essence was there. He would know that face anywhere. It was Eli. Eli Parker, his childhood best friend. His brother in spirit. The kid who had once taken the blame when Keanu broke old man Davis's window with a baseball. The same Eli who had taught him how to ride a bike, who had stood by his side during the darkest days of his early life. Keanu couldn't move. He just stared. Memories rushed in like a flood. Summer afternoons riding bikes through dusty roads, sleeping under the stars in makeshift tents, sneaking into the town's only cinema with stolen coins. And then, nothing. Life had pulled them apart. Keanu had left to chase dreams while Eli had stayed behind, swallowed by silence and time. The waitress brought his food. He nodded politely, barely registering her words. He had to see Eli. He had to talk to him. After paying for his meal and leaving a generous tip, Keanu stood, grabbed his jacket, and walked toward the counter. He didn't ask for permission. He simply pushed through the door marked staff only. The kitchen was filled with steam and the clatter of dishes. Eli was still scrubbing, lost in his world. "Eli?" Keanu said quietly. The man froze. He turned, slowly, soap suds dripping from his fingers. His eyes met Keanu's and widened. The plate he was holding slipped and shattered on the floor. "Keanu," he whispered, voice trembling. For a moment, neither moved. Two men, once inseparable, now stood inches apart, separated by decades of silence, pain, and life. The years had carved their stories into their faces, but the bond had never left. Keanu stepped forward and opened his arms. Eli didn't hesitate. He dropped the towel and embraced him tightly, fiercely, like a man clinging to something he thought he'd lost forever. "I thought you forgot about me," Eli murmured, voice cracking. "I never forgot you," Keanu said softly. "Not for a second." They stood like that, wrapped in silence, letting the years melt away. The kitchen faded. The world outside didn't matter. When they finally sat down at a small table in the break room, Eli wiped his hands on a ragged towel, embarrassed. I didn't think you'd remember me," he said. Keanu leaned forward. "Eli, you were the first person who made me believe in myself. You were my family. How could I forget?" Eli looked down. "Life didn't go the way I planned, man. I stayed. Mom got sick. Dad left. I had to take care of things. College didn't happen. Acting. Dreams faded. This is where I ended up. Keanu's heart ached. You don't need to explain. Life's not a straight road. Eli chuckled bitterly. It's not even a road sometimes. More like a ditch. Keanu smiled gently. Maybe. But sometimes, a ditch leads to a hidden path. They talked for hours, revisiting childhood, sharing stories. Eli spoke of his struggles, working double shifts, caring for his mother until she passed, sleeping in shelters, then finding work at the diner. He didn't complain. He just told it like it was. And through it all, Keanu listened. Deeply. The next morning, Keanu returned to the diner. This time he waited outside until Eli finished his shift. You free today? Keanu asked. Yeah, Eli replied, confused. Come with me. Where? You'll see. They drove out of town, past hills and winding roads, until they reached a quiet lake. The same lake they used to visit as boys. Keanu had found it again, untouched by time. They sat by the water, skipping stones, silent. Then Keanu turned. I want you to come to Los Angeles with me. Eli stared. What? I have an extra room. And there's someone I want you to meet, someone who's hiring at a production house. And they need someone like you. Keanu, I can't. Yes, you can, he interrupted softly. You've carried others your whole life. Now let someone carry you for a change. Eli's eyes welled with tears. For the first time in years, he felt seen. He felt worthy. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. We've both walked different paths, but maybe it's time we walk together again. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting a golden glow over the lake, two old friends sat quietly, no longer bound by the past, but inspired by what might still come. Memories in motion, the next few days passed like a dream for Eli Parker, and yet the weight of reality never quite left his shoulders. Even though Keanu had offered him a lifeline, one he never imagined receiving, there was a gnawing hesitation inside him. Fear, doubt, guilt. It whispered to him in the quiet moments, telling him he didn't belong in the world Keanu came from now. That world was red carpets, flashing lights, and rooms full of people who had never scrubbed grease off cracked diner plates at 2 a.m. But Keanu, ever patient, didn't push. Instead, he showed up every day after Eli's shifts ended. They talked. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they said nothing. They would sit in Keanu's rented cabin just outside of town, sipping tea or eating old favorite snacks, peanut butter on crackers, toasted marshmallows by the fire, homemade lemonade. And in those moments, something in Eli began to stir. Not hope exactly, not yet, but a flicker, like a match in the wind trying to stay lit. You remember that treehouse we built? Keanu asked one night, stretching his legs out on the wooden floor of the cabin, fire crackling beside him. Eli chuckled. You mean the one that collapsed because you thought duct tape could hold up the roof? Hey, Keanu said with a mock frown. In my defense, duct tape can fix a lot, not gravity. Fair. They both laughed. Then, without realizing it, they drifted into deeper territory. Eli looked into the flames. You ever feel like maybe you missed your chance? Keanu tilted his head. You mean in life? Yeah, like you're stuck being the person you didn't mean to become. And even if someone throws you a rope like you did, you're afraid to grab it. Keanu sat silently for a moment. I used to feel that way. A lot. After my dad left, after River died, after a lot of things. Sometimes I still do. Eli blinked, surprised. But you're you. People look up to you. And I look up to people like you, Eli. Keanu said softly. You stayed when others ran. You gave when you had nothing. You didn't chase fame, but you held on to your soul. You didn't lose that. I almost did. Eli looked away, tears pooling at the edge of his eyes. For so long, he had carried the quiet shame of being left behind. Now, for the first time, He realized he hadn't been abandoned. He had chosen a different kind of sacrifice. One no one ever applauded, but one that mattered just as deeply. The next morning, Keanu invited Eli to take a walk through town. "Come on," he said, tossing. "A jacket. You need a break. And I've got an idea." They strolled past familiar buildings, now older and more faded. The barber shop with the striped pole was still there. The old movie theater, now shut down, had vines climbing its sides like the earth itself wanted to pull it into memory. They passed by the playground where they once dared each other to jump from the swings at the highest point. Back then, falling didn't feel like failing. It felt like flying. They reached a small community center near the edge of town. Keanu pushed open the door and greeted a few kids playing table tennis inside. "You work here now?" Eli asked. "No, but I've donated here before. They've got a little after-school film program," Keanu said, eyes lighting up. "The kids make short films, write stories, even act a little." Eli smiled despite himself. "That's cool. They need someone to help with editing, maybe teach a class or two, someone who knows stories, someone patient." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Me?" Keanu shrugged. "Why not? You've got more heart than anyone I know, and you always used to tell the best stories around the campfire." Eli hesitated. "I don't know if I'd be any good." "Eli," Keanu said, pausing at the doorway before they left. "You're better than good. You're real. And these kids don't need perfect. They need real." That night, Eli didn't sleep much. He kept replaying the offer, the faces of the children, the quiet pride in Keanu's voice. He stared at the ceiling of his small apartment, worn and water-stained. He listened to the ticking of the old clock on the wall, and for the first time in years, he wondered what it would feel like to say yes. The next day, Eli walked into the community center on his own. The director, a kind woman named Sarah, welcomed him kindly and handed him a stack of scripts written by the kids. Some were messy, others barely legible. One was a single page about a space dog who saved Earth from exploding spaghetti aliens. Eli laughed, and for the first time in a very long time, he started to feel alive again. In the days that followed, he began helping the kids film with an old camera. They used cardboard boxes for props, plastic swords from dollar stores, and costumes sewn from old curtains. The films weren't polished, but they were full of soul. He taught them how to frame shots, tell stories through silence, and most importantly, how to believe that their voices mattered. Keanu would drop by often, bringing pizza or popcorn, and sitting in the back watching the chaos unfold. Sometimes he'd act in a scene. Once, he played the villain, bad wig, fake mustache, and all. Lucio. Kids loved it. They called him Uncle Keanu. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. A producer from a local film festival walked into the community center. He had heard about the kids' films from his niece who attended the program. Intrigued, he stayed to watch a short film Eli had helped direct. A quiet, powerful piece about a young girl and her imaginary dragon who helped her deal with loneliness after her parents divorced. The room fell silent when it ended. Then the producer clapped. He walked up to Eli and said, "Who directed that?" "They did," Eli said, pointing at the group of kids grinning nervously. "And who taught them?" "I just helped them believe they could do it." The producer smiled. "I want to showcase this at the festival, and I want to meet whoever wrote that script." Keanu, who had been leaning against the doorframe, caught Eli's eye. He gave him a slow, proud nod. That night, Eli and Keanu sat under the stars like they used to as boys. The wind was cool, the world still. "I never thought life could feel like this again," Eli said quietly. Keanu smiled. "It's only the beginning." Eli turned to him, voice heavy with emotion. "Thank you." Keanu looked at him unwavering. "Don't thank me. You showed up, you did the work, you healed. I just reminded you who you are." As the fire beside them crackled softly, and the moonlight cast silver streaks across the lake, the silence between them was full, not with regret or pain, but with peace, and something neither of them dared name yet, something like purpose. Echoes of the past, Voices of the present. A month had passed since Eli Parker stepped out of that quiet, dusty town and into a city that never slept. Los Angeles had always seemed like a myth to him, something too loud, too fast, too unreachable. But now he was in it, not just as a visitor, but as a man with a purpose. Every morning he'd wake up in Keanu's guest room, sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains, and for a few quiet seconds he'd forget the decades of exhaustion behind him. In those mornings, life felt light again, like he hadn't missed his chance after all. The small independent studio where he now worked buzzed with quiet creativity. It wasn't glamorous. There were no red carpets or paparazzi, just people hunched over keyboards, sketching out frames, muttering dialogue to themselves as they acted out scenes in narrow hallways. And Eli, he thrived in it. The director, a sharp but kind woman named Claire, had taken a liking to him. She once said, "You don't talk much, Eli, but when you do, it makes people listen." His calm voice and steady presence became something of a compass for the younger writers. He helped them polish their drafts, asked them questions no one else bothered to ask. What does your character want? What is she afraid of? What truth are you hiding in this story? They had no idea he had never gone to film school, never studied in Hollywood. All they saw was someone who saw them. But behind every smile Eli gave, there was a shadow. Some nights, after a long day at the studio, he'd sit alone in the garden behind Keanu's house, staring at the orange glow of the city. Horizon. He would think of his mother, of the nights he spent holding her hand while the chemo drained her strength. He would think of how many years he had buried his own dreams to keep food on the table. The silence of those memories didn't scream, it whispered. And sometimes those whispers cut deeper than anything loud ever could. Keanu noticed. He didn't say anything for a while. He respected silence. But one evening, as they sat side by side watching an old Hitchcock film, Keanu muted the volume and turned to him. "You still think about the time you lost, don't you?" Eli didn't answer immediately. The flickering screen lit his face in pale colors. "Every day," he said finally. "I think about how long I was stuck, how many years I thought life had passed me by." Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I used to feel that way too. After Jennifer passed, I thought, what's the point of going on when all the good things have already happened? But then I realized, maybe the best things are still ahead. We just don't always see them coming." Eli looked at him, his eyes glassy. "But how do you forgive yourself for wasting so much time?" Keanu exhaled deeply. "You stop calling it wasted. You call it survived. And then you start from where you are." A silence followed. Not awkward, not heavy. Just real. Then, out of nowhere, Keanu grinned. "You know, there's a festival next month in Venice Beach. Short films, community submissions. Claire said your team's dragon story was accepted." "You going?" Eli blinked. "Wait, what? You heard me." "She submitted it. Said the kids wanted you to direct the final edit." Eli's mouth opened slightly. I don't know what to say." "Say yes." The weeks that followed were the most demanding of Eli's life, and the most fulfilling. He worked late into the nights with the kids, refining the film's structure, coaching them through their lines, editing frames one by one with painstaking care. He didn't have the best equipment, but he made it work. He taught the kids not just how to make a film, but how to believe in the stories they wanted to tell. On the day of the festival, the beach pulsed with life. Colorful banners waved in the breeze. Food trucks lined the boardwalk. Local artists displayed paintings and handmade jewelry, and tucked among them was a small tent with a screen set up for the community showcase. Eli stood backstage, adjusting a mic on one of the young actors, a girl named Maya who had written the original dragon story. She was nervous, clutching her script like a life raft. "You got this," he said gently. "Remember, the story isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest." She looked up at him. "Did you ever think you'd be doing this?" He paused, then smiled. "No, but Sometimes the best chapters come after you thought the book was over. The film played to a full crowd. At first the audience was quiet, then came the laughter at all the right moments, the hush during the emotional scenes, and finally, applause. Real, thunderous, heartfelt applause. Eli sat in the back row, hands clasped, eyes wide. He didn't move for a long time. Afterward, people came to shake his hand. Strangers, other filmmakers. One man, a teacher, asked him if he'd consider speaking at his school. Another woman offered to collaborate on a script, but what mattered most was when Maya walked up to him, eyes shining. She didn't say anything. She just hugged him. That night, back at Keanu's place, Eli stood outside on the balcony. The city stretched below like a glowing sea. Keanu joined him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You did something good today," Keanu said, handing him a cup. Eli took it. "I didn't think I had it in me anymore." "But you did." A pause. "You know what's funny?" Eli said. "For years I thought my life was over, that the world had moved on without me. But today felt like a beginning." Keanu nodded. "That's because it is." The wind picked up slightly, warm and familiar. Somewhere in the city, music played faintly and cars hummed along roads. Life continued, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Eli felt like he was part of it, not just watching from the edges. He turned to Keanu, voice thick. "Thank you for walking into that diner." Keanu smiled, eyes soft. "Maybe I was meant to." As they stood there, 2 old friends reborn in a new chapter of their lives, there was no need for more words. The silence held it all. The pain, the growth, the healing, and most of all, then the promise that even broken things can bloom again. The door that wouldn't open. The success of the short film at the Venice Beach Festival rippled through Eli's life in ways he hadn't expected. In the weeks that followed, he began receiving invitations to speak at local schools, appear on podcast interviews, and even collaborate on other community projects. The kids from the film program treated him like a hero. For the first time in years, Eli walked into rooms where people stood up to greet him. His voice, once buried beneath years of silence, now filled spaces with stories, ideas, and quiet wisdom. But even in the light of this rebirth, there remained one door Eli had never dared to open, a door carved not in wood or steel, but memory. And no matter how far he'd come, that door stood locked inside him, holding back the one piece of his past he had not yet faced. His father. When Eli was 14, his father had walked out. No goodbye. No letter. Just a shattered window, a screaming match with his mother, and the sound of a car disappearing down the road. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos. Eli had grown up fast, too fast, helping his mother while nursing a wound that had never truly closed. Years later, he heard whispers of where his father might have gone. Fresno, then Sacramento. But he had never tried to find him. What would be the point? A man like that didn't deserve forgiveness. And yet, deep down, Eli knew he couldn't keep running from that pain. Not anymore. One evening, he sat with Keanu on the rooftop garden of the studio watching the sun dissolve behind the hills. They shared a meal of grilled vegetables and rice, talking about a documentary project Eli had been invited to co-write. But Keanu sensed the distance in his friend's eyes. "You ever think about looking for him?" Keanu asked, breaking the silence gently. Eli didn't have to ask who. "All the time," he admitted. "But the thought of seeing him, it makes me sick." "Maybe seeing him isn't about him," Keanu said. "Maybe it's about you. About taking back the part of your story he tried to erase." Eli leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "What if he doesn't remember me? What if he's exactly who I remember? Angry, selfish, and cold? Then you'll know. And you won't be guessing anymore. You'll be free." The next morning, Eli searched old public records, voter registries, and hospital entries. He didn't have to look far. His father, Paul Parker, now lived just 2 hours north in a small retirement community near Paso Robles. He stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop. A week passed. Then 2. He didn't speak of it again, but one Saturday, he packed a small overnight bag, told Keanu he'd be gone a day or 2, and drove north alone. The road twisted through quiet hills and past endless vineyards. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and lavender. Eli felt like a boy again behind the wheel, unsure, full of questions, bracing for whatever storm might lie ahead. The retirement home was modest. Brick walls, trimmed bushes, a shaded courtyard where elderly residents sat playing cards or sipping tea. Eli approached the front desk and asked for Paul Parker. The nurse hesitated, studied him a moment, then pointed to a garden bench near the back under a large oak tree. And there he was, older, frailer than Eli remembered, but unmistakable. The same angular jaw, the same eyes. Only now they were sunken, with time, lined with regret. He sat reading a worn paperback, lips moving as he mouthed the words. Eli stood frozen. Everything he had rehearsed in the car vanished. There were no speeches now, only a storm of emotion and the sound of his own heart. He walked forward. "Paul," he said, not daring to call him Dad. The old man looked up. His eyes flicked over Eli's face. Confusion, then realization. A sharp intake of breath. "Eli," he whispered. They stared at each other like strangers. "You're alive," his father said finally. "Barely," Eli answered. Paul closed the book slowly. "I didn't think you'd ever come. I didn't think I ever would." A long silence fell between them. Not the comfortable kind. This one was dense, full of years and things left unsaid. Paul motioned to the bench. "Sit?" Eli hesitated, then sat. They spoke slowly at first. Paul asked about Eli's life, where he'd been, what he'd done. Eli gave him only parts of the truth, just enough to answer the questions, not enough to expose the hurt. Paul shared fragments of his own story, the jobs he lost, the health scares, the years he spent drinking, the therapy he tried too late. "I was a coward," Paul admitted. "I couldn't handle responsibility. I hurt your mother. I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me." Eli looked at him, eyes calm but firm. "Good. Because I'm not here to give you anything." Paul nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But I needed to see you. Because for years I blamed myself for you leaving. I thought maybe if I'd been a better son, you wouldn't have gone." Paul's hands trembled. "I'm sorry you felt that way. It wasn't your fault, it was mine, all of it." A tear slipped down Eli's cheek, surprising him. "I'm not that scared kid anymore," he said. "And I'm not here to reopen wounds. I just wanted to face the thing that followed me everywhere. And now I have." Paul nodded again. "Thank you for coming." "Don't thank me. Just live the rest of your life better than you lived the first half." Eli stood. His father didn't try to stop him. Just watched him go. On the drive back, the sky opened with rain, soft and cleansing. Eli pulled over on a quiet stretch of highway and stepped out of the car. He stood in the downpour, arms by his sides, letting it soak him to the bone. He cried, not out of anger, not out of sorrow, but release. When he returned to Los Angeles, Keanu was waiting on the porch, 2 mugs of tea already prepared. "You okay?" Keanu asked. Eli sat beside him, soaked and silent. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think I am." Keanu smiled and passed him the tea. No more chains, no more ghosts. Only the road ahead. The stage of second chances after Eli returned from facing the ghost of his father. Something inside him shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches, no sudden transformation. But there was a stillness in him now, like a lake that had finally stopped rippling. For so long he had lived with the noise of the past buzzing in his ears. Now there was space for something new to grow. Keanu noticed it immediately. The way Eli stood, straighter. The way he walked into a room without shrinking. The way he no longer apologized for simply existing. The weeks rolled on. Spring turned to summer. The city, relentless and alive, wrapped itself around their days. And in the quiet of this new chapter, Eli began to build something that was his. It started with an idea. One evening, after a community workshop, Eli sat with Claire, the studio director, under the strings of lights in the garden courtyard. They were the last ones there. Most of the crew had gone home. The air was warm, filled with the hum of crickets and the faint beat of music from a nearby apartment window. "I want to create something bigger," Eli said. Claire looked up from her notes. "How big?" "A full-length film, small budget, honest story, something from the heart." She studied him. "You want to write it?" "I already have." He pulled out a worn notebook, one Keanu had given him months earlier. Inside were handwritten pages, revisions scribbled in the margins, coffee stains, and post-it notes. It was raw, unpolished, real. Claire flipped through the pages. Her expression softened. This feels different." "Because it is," Eli said. "It's not about fame or selling tickets. It's about what it means to come back from the dark. It's about people like me, people who thought life had passed them by." Claire closed the notebook gently. "I'll back you." "Really?" "Yes. But you have to direct it." Eli blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. No one else can tell this story." Production began 3 months later. It was a skeleton crew, just a handful of passionate souls who believed in the story. Actors from community, theaters, camera operators who had day jobs, sound techs who worked freelance gigs to pay rent. But everyone showed up every day with their whole heart. Keanu, of course, was there, not in front of the camera. This wasn't his story to tell, but behind the scenes. He cooked meals for the crew, ran lines with the actors, even helped paint sets and carry equipment. No one cared that he was a Hollywood star. In this space, he was just Keanu, someone who believed in the power of stories to change lives. The film, titled Ashes of the Bluebird, followed a man named Ben who, after years of silence and suffering, returns to his hometown to bury his mother and finds himself unexpectedly drawn into the lives of people he once knew and the dreams he had long abandoned. It was fiction, but only barely. Eli poured his soul into every line, every scene. There were moments on set where he had to step away, overcome by the weight of it all. But every time he faltered, someone, Keanu, Claire, or even one of the young kids from the film program would steady him. On the final day of filming, as the sun dipped behind the Hollywood hills and bathed the set in a golden glow, the last scene was shot in silence. No clapping, no cheers, just stillness and tears, because they all knew something sacred had just been captured. When the film was accepted into the Santa Barbara Film Festival, Eli didn't believe it at first. He thought Claire was joking when she told him, but she wasn't. "They want to screen it during the second night," she said, handing him the email with trembling fingers. Keanu was the first to hug him. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. "You earned this," he said. The night of the festival was surreal. Eli stood at the back of the theater, dressed in a borrowed suit that felt too formal for him. The crowd was filled with filmmakers, critics, families, and strangers. The lights dimmed. The film began. Eli couldn't breathe. Scene after scene unfolded. The audience reacted just as he'd hoped. Laughter, silence, tears. People leaned forward in their seats. Some wiped their eyes. Others nodded slowly as if they recognized themselves in Ben. When the credits rolled, there was a moment of quiet. And then, applause. Not polite, not obligatory, but thunderous. From the gut. From the soul. Eli's knees buckled slightly. Keanu caught him. Afterward, during the Q&A, someone asked Eli, "What inspired this story?" He looked at the crowd. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded. "A friend walked into a diner one day," he said, "and reminded me that my story wasn't over, that even if you've lived half your life in shadows, it's never too late to find the light. This film isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who thought they'd been forgotten by the world." The audience rose to their feet. Keanu stood at the very back, arms crossed, eyes shining. Eli had arrived, not in the way Hollywood measured success, but in the only way that ever truly mattered. He had faced the broken parts of himself, and instead of hiding them, he used them to build something beautiful, and in doing so, he gave others permission to do the same. Later that night, the two friends sat on a bench outside the venue. Their tux jackets were unbuttoned, bow ties undone, shoes kicked off. Eli looked up at the stars. "I never thought I'd get here." Keanu leaned back. "And now that you are?" Eli smiled. "I want to keep going, not for me, but for everyone still stuck in kitchens, still hiding their stories in notebooks, still thinking no one will ever care." Keanu raised his drink. "To the storytellers." Eli clinked his glass. "To the stories that save us." The night stretched long and quiet, and somewhere deep inside the city, another forgotten soul picked up a pen, opened a page, and began to write, because one man's return had lit a path for others to follow. When the lights go dim, the heart still shiny. Seasons passed like slow-moving waves. The buzz around ashes of the bluebird faded, as all things eventually do, but what remained was far more important than the headlines or applause. The film had sparked something, not just in viewers across the country who reached out with letters and messages of gratitude, but in Eli himself. Where once his world was small and dim, now it felt like an open sky waiting to be flown across. He no longer questioned his worth. He no longer doubted the power of his story. He no longer walked in the shadow of the man he used to be. But even light must dance with shadow to be fully seen. The morning Eli found the note taped to the front door of the community studio, he was carrying a bag of donated art supplies. The note was short, printed, official. "Due to loss of funding and pending legal disputes over ownership, this facility will be closed indefinitely." His hands trembled slightly as he folded the paper. The studio, the very space that had given him a second chance, the home for so many young voices, was going dark. When Claire arrived minutes later, she didn't have answers, only tears. They cut the program. Budget slashes. Some of the grant money disappeared, mismanaged by people we trusted. There's nothing left to fight with. Eli sat on the front steps in silence. He watched the kids arrive one by one, hopeful and smiling, only to be turned away. Some cried, others got angry. One boy, Jordan, a quiet teen who just started writing his first script, stood frozen, holding a camera in his arms like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Eli stood and gently put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find a way." But he didn't know how. That night, back at Keanu's place, Eli paced the living room. The fire crackled but offered no warmth. His thoughts spiraled, not just of the building but of the kids who had found healing within its walls, the single mother whose daughter had blossomed after being cast in a short film, the shy boy who had once whispered, "I didn't know people like me could be heroes too." "I can't let it end like this," Eli finally said aloud. Keanu, sitting in the corner, his fingers wrapped around a mug of tea, looked up. "Then don't. We don't have money, or a location, or legal rights. What do you have?" Eli paused. "A story. Then start there." What happened next was not a miracle. It was hard, gritty, slow, but it was real. Eli began reaching out. Every connection he had made through the film festival, the podcast interviews, the community events. He wrote a blog post titled, "Stories Should Never Go Homeless," detailing the closure of the studio and calling for support. He shared it with honesty, not begging, but inviting others to believe again. The post went viral. Donations began to trickle in, small at first, then larger. A retired teacher sent $200 with a note that read, "You reminded me why I became an educator." A former student of the program posted a video recounting how the studio saved his life. It was shared thousands of times. Keanu recorded a message too, simple, unpolished, just him in front of a bookshelf. "If a single story could give my friend Eli a second chance," he said, "imagine what hundreds of stories could do for the next generation." Let's build something that lasts. Within 3 weeks, they had enough funding to lease a small warehouse on the east side of the city. It was dusty, cracked floors, busted windows, but it had walls. And it had potential. Eli and Keanu showed up with tool belts. Claire rallied volunteers. The kids came, some with their parents, bringing hammers, paintbrushes, and hope. Together they cleaned, built, rewired, painted, repurposed. They named it the Bluebird House, and it became more than just a film space. It became a sanctuary. 1 year later, Eli stood on the new stage inside the Bluebird House. The walls were covered with art. Shelves, lined with scripts, cameras, sound booths, and computers filled the corners, and everywhere, young faces glowing with joy, laughter bouncing off the beams like music. It was opening night of their first full-length play, written by Maya, now 16, directed by Jordan, who used to be afraid to speak, and produced under the mentorship of Eli Parker. Keanu sat in the back row, arms crossed, the softest smile on his face. The lights dimmed. The play began, and Eli didn't watch as a director that night. He watched as a father might, as a gardener does when flowers bloom in soil once thought barren. Every line that echoed across the stage wasn't just part of the performance. It was a living heartbeat of every soul who had believed, who had fought, who had refused to let dreams die quietly. After the final bow, Eli stood up slowly. The room rose with him, and the applause, oh, the applause, wasn't just for the actors. It was for the man who used to wash dishes in a forgotten diner. It was for the boy who sat in a broken treehouse, wondering if he mattered. It was for the storyteller who turned pain into purpose. Late that night, when the building had emptied and the stars hung heavy in the sky, Eli and Keanu sat together on the rooftop. No suits, no cameras, just old jeans and tired eyes. Eli broke the silence. Do you think we really made a difference?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed down through the rooftop window to the room below. Inside, Jordan was helping a younger student adjust a tripod. Maya sat with a group of kids reading aloud from a new script. Laughter erupted, the kind that could only come from feeling safe, seen, and free. Keanu turned to him. "I don't think it. I know it." Eli leaned back, arms behind his head, and looked up at the stars. They were brighter now. Not because the night had changed, but because he had. And as the city breathed around him, alive and eternal, he whispered a quiet truth into the dark. "I'm finally home."